Welcome along to the next instalment of our Landlord 2020 Vision campaign running throughout January. And all this month we're going to be talking to industry commentators about what landlords need to focus on over the next 12 months. And I'm very delighted that we've got David Cox, Chief Executive of ARLA, joining me now. And David, what do you kind of think of this idea of 2020 vision tying in with the 2020 year? Landlords have got to have very clear vision, haven't they?
Well, we're going into a new decade in 2020, and landlords have got to be thinking about their portfolios going into the future. Now, we're starting a new decade. It's a great opportunity to review what they've got, what is coming down the line at them, and how they need to adapt and amend their business models, their portfolio, to meet those challenges. And I suppose the key ones are the abolition of Section 21, potentially, we don't know yet. The new housing court, we have to factor in that come the new tax year, lost mortgage interest relief completely. We've got new minimum energy efficiency standards coming in on the 1st of April as well for existing tenancies. So you've got to think about your sitting tenants, not just your new tenants. And then everything that is to come. Maybe general elections on the horizon, who knows at this point in time. We might have a new government, we may have the continuation of policies from a previous government. Because at this point in time, we don't actually know really what Boris's legislative priorities are in housing. All we've got is the closing of consultations from Theresa May's government. So we now need to find out what is the focus of the new government, and if we have another general election, the new government.
I should point out we are recording this interview in October 2019, so some things may have become more apparent when we actually get to air this video. But David, a lot of the things you mentioned all point to uncertainty for landlords, and it's very difficult for any business to run when there is so much uncertainty. And I don't know whether you agree, but at times like this, it's really important just to go back to the fundamentals and kind of try and focus on those, and providing great quality properties for tenants and having really good tenancies, because those are the things that you do know about.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't say it's not just landlords, but the entire property industry is in this massive state of flux of uncertainty at the moment, with the chaos that is going on in Westminster, the Brexit uncertainty. It is having a significant impact on the property industry, and particularly residential sales. I know from the sales side of Propertymark that it is having a big impact on volume, price, stock in general. For landlords, to a certain extent, we're a little bit sheltered. We've done some research. We don't think Brexit is going to have a massive impact on the lettings market, because there are always going to be tenants. Demand vastly outstrips supply, and with things like the changes to Section 21, the tenant fees ban, and the minimum energy efficiency standards, we are seeing this year the highest number of landlords selling per branch in our monthly survey than we've ever seen. It's still not huge. We're talking about 4 to 5 a month selling up properties out of a managed portfolio of about 200 per branch. So we're not talking huge amounts, but with successive government policies that over the last few years, the only word I can use is attack the sector. We have seen assault after assault after assault, and demonising landlords for the government's failure to build enough social housing. And rather than actually getting to grips with the housing crisis, that there is not enough social housing in this country to house all of those that need social housing, they are trying to demonise private landlords who are the ones that are actually picking up that slack. And I think this is something we are pushing very hard with government at the moment. Stop demonising the sector, because we're already starting to see, and for the first time in I think about 15 years, we've seen the sector contract in the last 12 months. And the official statistics from the government, the English Housing Survey, showed that for the first time this year, when it's published its data, the sector actually shrank rather than increased. Now, at a time when we have such massive demand, increasing demand, meeting reducing supply, everybody knows what the answer is. It means rents are going to go up, which doesn't work for the government's key agenda of getting more people into home ownership. Because if rents are going up, their salaries aren't going up to match it, which means they can save less, which makes that dream of home ownership even further out of reach. It is the argument we have been making to government for the last 4 years, and they need to start listening, because especially with the Conservative government we've had, that prides itself on home ownership levels, some of its policies have had the direct opposite effect.
Indeed.
Prime example, tenant fees ban. Government was saying it will save tenants hundreds of pounds a month. They issued an impact assessment that said that it would save tenants £85 million a year. We're seeing in our monthly surveys, agents are putting up the rents as a result. We're here today at the Property Investor Show, and I'm talking to landlords who are saying we are doing exactly the same. We've seen news articles recently about it. It hasn't saved tenants anything. All it's done is slice the pie slightly differently. And what they need to factor in, and what the government really need to consider at this moment in time, is how do we support landlords to bring that cost of housing down? Because if their goal is to get more homeowners, then they need to reduce the cost of renting in order for people to be able to save for the deposit to buy the house. It's not rocket science, but I am shocked that successive governments haven't grasped this simple and fundamental point.
Well, it's very good to hear that you are getting that message, loud and clear across the government. I think one of the trends we may see in 2020 is increased tenant mobility due to the deposit replacement schemes coming much more into play. Does ARLA have a view on the deposit replacement schemes, the concept of it?
I'll be honest, we are a little bit wary of the concept. It's still in its infancy. I know a lot of landlords and a lot of agents are choosing to do them, but the schemes are different. Make sure you understand, if you are either a landlord or a letting agent, exactly what you are signing up to. Because some only provide protection for a certain period of time, some only provide certain levels of protection, and we have to factor in what happens if these schemes don't survive and they collapse. With some schemes, there is an insurance policy in place. Therefore, even if the scheme itself collapses, the landlord remains protected. But that is the minority. In fact, I only can think of one scheme that happens. With all the other schemes, if the scheme collapses due to weight of claims, the landlord loses their insurance. So it's a good innovation into the market. I think for some people, it will be beneficial. For others, it won't be. And I think landlords and agents have to make a very clear decision. And what I've said very publicly in the past is I am a little bit wary about this becoming the industry's PPI moment. If landlords and tenants don't understand what they are getting and get burnt at the end, this could create a massive PPI-style issue for the industry in a few years' time. And I particularly talk about tenants on this one because we're not 100% clear whether tenants entirely understand that they are paying this money at the front, but if they have rent arrears, there is damage to the property, they're still liable for it at the end. And therefore, is that going to cause concerns and complaints later down the line? I don't know.
There's a lot, to see how it actually works out when it's actually, coming to end of tenancies. As you say, still very early days.
Absolutely.
Final question, David. When landlord margins are being squeezed, some landlords we hear are saying, "Oh, well, I'll start self-managing." If they've got experience, then okay, that's a definite option. But certainly for newcomer landlords coming into the sector, I always advise them to start out working with a reputable agent that has voluntarily committed to professional standards like ARLA, your members, because to my mind it's a risk mitigation, and for 10% of the rent I think it's extremely good value for money, and it's tax deductible.
I agree with you entirely. And if you think the laws are becoming more complicated, the penalties are becoming larger, if you don't, it's that old adage, you don't know what you don't know.
And that's what trips you up.
Exactly. Now, if you think you don't do a right to rent check, that could be a £3,000 fine. You don't serve the how to rent guide, you can't regain possession of your property, could cost you thousands and thousands of pounds. These are lots of tiny, tiny little laws that can actually have massive consequences. Does a new landlord always know that they might have to go and get a licence from the local authority? That's a £30,000 fine there and then. Tenant Fees Act. If you charge a tenant something that you're not allowed to, that you think is perfectly reasonable, £5,000 fine. Don't charge more than 5 weeks rent because you've got 5 weeks deposit because you've got a pet. There you go, you breached the Tenant Fees Act, £5,000 fine, plus difficulty regaining through Section 21. There's a huge amount going on. So if you don't know what you don't know, so start with the person that does. It's why we've been arguing for such a long time for regulation of the property industry, and particularly letting agents, because some letting agents don't know what they're doing, and therefore we need a benchmark. When letting agents are, as I said a few minutes ago, managing on average 200 properties for their landlord client, they need to know what they are doing. It's why all of our members have to have a qualification at level 3, akin to an A level, before they can be an ARLA member. And we have been working with the government, and we're expecting an announcement very soon that they are going to make that a mandatory requirement across sales agents, letting agents and auctioneers. And we hope that will significantly improve the quality, the customer service, the knowledge, and ultimately the reputation of both letting agents and their landlord clients.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining me here at our Landlord 2020 Vision campaign. Really, really good to get your input, David. And, you know, Property Tribes hope to work more closely with you and your members in the new year.
Absolutely.
And, you know, there's so much value that you add to everything that we do on Property Tribes that it's very, very appreciated by us that you are a contributor to our videos. So thank you
very much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.